And Marcia, just a moment right now. We have political expert Javier Lacayo on the phone with us. Can you hear us, Javier?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
I wanted to get your thoughts about what has transpired in the past 30 minutes.
Yeah. So it is. It's a sad day for New York. But what I think a lot of folks will be grateful to see is that the governor seems to have taken some accountability for his actions. I think we have seen a clear recognition from the governor and his team that there was no way to escape the implications of these incredibly damning allegations that came out of the Attorney General's report.
Javier, it's Jessica Moore here. I'm wondering, what do you think Cuomo does next?
I think right now the governor's biggest concern is going to be trying to preserve his legacy. This stepping down is a clear response to an inevitable impeachment that he was going to face in the state legislature, where the votes were clearly there and where the process was being expedited. I think what we saw in his speech today was him trying to remind folks of a lot of the great things that he's been able to do, over 2.5 terms or so. However, as a lot of folks know, the governor's ultimate goal always was to have that 4th term that his father was never able to get after he was defeated by George Pataki. So, he's coming short of even the full 3 terms that his father was able to fulfill.
Andrew Cuomo has worked his life to get to this point as governor, and there were even talks he was going to run for president if we go back a couple of years ago. So what do you think he could do as you're talking about his legacy at this point?
I think right now all he can do is ensure as smooth as possible as the transition. We're going to now have our first woman governor in the state's history with Kathy Hochul. And so I think that we'll see him really knuckling down over the next couple of weeks, getting everything ready for that transition. But at the end of the day, I don't really see a big political future for Andrew Cuomo. I think that now what we're going to begin to sort of shift our attention to is 2022, where I think we're going to see a very competitive field, especially on the Democratic side, for who the next governor of New York will potentially be.
Javier, it's Marcia Kramer. I wanted to ask you what you think about the governor's legacy after a space of time goes by and people get past this initial problem. Do you think that that historians will treat the governor kindly or not so kindly in terms of all the things he accomplished, from women's rights to gun control to same-sex marriage, etc.?
Look, I think the governor undoubtedly oversaw an incredibly transformative and historic period in New York's history. Marcia, you just mentioned a couple of them. We became the first, one of the real leaders in the country around things like LGBTQ marriage. And even during the COVID response, when I think a lot of Americans became really aware of him and his work for the first time, and really provided a lot of closure for folks at a time when we weren't getting leadership from the federal level. I think when historians look back, they will see that this was another powerful man that was caught up in I think, an extended wave of the Me Too era, where we have seen a reckoning that began in 2018 and is clearly still going on today, of men who have for decades been harassing women, abusive of women, and who finally were held accountable.
So, Javier, do you think he'll ever try to run again?
I don't know I don't think any of us can say definitively what Andrew Cuomo is going to do. I think what he has shown in his entire public life is that he is an incredibly defiant individual. Right now, I don't think that it's something that's in the cards for him. But never say never, right? I think, look, if he had gone through the impeachment process, that would have been even more difficult to fathom a future political career for him. But I think now, as he sort of steps away more on his own terms than he would have otherwise, there's certainly still a legal possibility for him to be eligible to run. but I don't know that he has a real future in New York or nationally at this point.
Javier, in 14 days, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will take the reins in the state of New York, becoming the first female governor in its history. What are your thoughts about her service to the state? And she's 62. She spent years in the political forums. She has been to every area of the state's 62 counties, and most of the times on the road driving there. So what are your thoughts about her serving as the next governor of New York?
I think Kathy Hochul is an incredibly capable and very dedicated public servant. She has been a great lieutenant governor over the last several years, but, you know, admittedly not super visible and with not a huge public profile. And so I think that this is going to be a lot of folks here in New York getting to know Kathy Hochul for the first time. We will see, you know, what kind of agenda that she brings forth. I'm sure that she's going to be articulating sort of what her priorities are going to be for the next year or so. And I expect that we will likely see her throw her name in the ringer for during the Democratic primary. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of Kathy Hochul and learning a lot more about her. So it's, again, it is a bittersweet moment for New York State, but I think all in all, the people will be better served with Kathy Hochul in charge.
Javier, what do you think happens in Albany now? Do lawmakers continue to pursue this impeachment, considering not just the sexual harassment claims, but the nursing home deaths, the book deal, the preferential treatment, or do they drop this and sort of let business get back to usual?
Look, I think the state is facing major crises right now that have nothing to do with Andrew Cuomo. I think what we saw from the governor's speech today is that he clearly wants the rest of New York State government to get back to the business of the people. I think right now whether they move forward on this impeachment is going to be up to the leadership. You know, there's a possibility if they do move forward with an impeachment process here that they could ban the governor from holding future state office. Whether there's going to be the political will or imperative urgency to do that, I think is still an open question. But I think more likely than not, we will see that lawmakers are going to be satiated with the governor resigning, and I think they'll be eager to get back to the business of dealing with the Delta variant and ensuring a robust recovery for the state from this pandemic.
Javier, my question to you is this. Given the fact that the overwhelming number of voters in New York are in downstate, she's from upstate, do you think that if she were to run for a full 4-year term, she would have an uphill battle, or do you think she would be the clear odds-on favorite?
I think Kathy Hochul is going to have a tough time. Look, we saw her struggle a lot with voters in the city back in 2018, where Jumaane Williams, even though he ultimately lost, was able to really pull a lot of support from New York City, and I believe even beat her in several downstate counties. So this is, Marcia, I think we're going to see a really crowded field. I think we're going to see Kathy Hochul, Jumaane Williams, the public advocate here from New York City, I believe has been expressing some interest in running. I also think Letitia James, the Attorney General, is going to face tremendous pressure to run and to throw her throw her name in. As she's a really beloved and very popular elected official here, who not only brought the governor to justice in many ways, but would also make history as the first woman of color to serve in the executive mansion.
What about Bill de Blasio?
I think that I saw the story about Bill not necessarily saying that he's not going to run, but I think that Bill is not very popular in the city, and I think he's even less popular in many ways outside of the city. So I think that he will face an uphill battle.
Javier Lacayo.
But he could certainly be one of the candidates.
Political expert Javier Lacayo, thank you very much for speaking with us today. We will speak with you throughout